welcome back to Ex Post Watcho, where we rewatch movies from our youth and see if they hold up. This week, my friend Jason and I, say hi, Jason.
Hello.
We're watching Little Women from 1994. Jason, have you seen Little Women from 1994?
I have not. I vaguely remember this movie coming out at the time and being, a fairly young man and being like, I don't think you could give me a less appealing title for a movie than Little Women.
Yeah, we would have been around 10 years old at this time. Have you seen any of the Little Women movies or TV series or read the book?
The Little Women expanded universe. Yeah. The comic books. I read the comics.
All right, so this is my favorite Little Women movie. I haven't seen them all. I haven't seen the newest one, but this movie, Winona Ryder plays Jo March, one of the sisters. And I think I've said this before on this podcast. I wanted to be Winona Ryder. When I was younger, I thought she was the ultimate. So I loved this movie. I don't know that I saw it when I was quite 10. I think I was a little bit older, maybe. This has always been a bit of a Christmas movie for my family. I guess we're kind of going into our Christmas movies that we've selected for our podcast. So this is a bit of a Christmas tradition in my home. I have two sisters. I used to force everyone to watch It's a Wonderful Life, but everyone would groan and moan about it, and then everyone else would fall asleep, besides my mother and myself. So we switched to Little Women, and I have really good memories associated with this. My sisters and I would, oh, you're this sister, and you're this sister, and it's just got a great cast. It has a really, I think, heartwarming story about siblings and obviously sisters in particular. So I know you don't have siblings, so you might not connect with this on the same level that I do.
All that shit is foreign to me.
But I think it's a well-made movie. It's Gillian Armstrong. I think the most recent thing that I recognize that she directed was Charlotte Gray with Cate Blanchett. So, it's a really just kind of coming-of-age story. It spans several decades with these sisters, and it's in the 19th century. It got 92% on Rotten Tomatoes, so hopefully that boosts your confidence in what you'll enjoy. I think it's a really beautifully made film, fairly true to the actual story and to the novel. It is almost 2 hours, but I don't think there are any really dull points. For me, there aren't anyway. Do you have any expectations going into this?
Man, I don't know. Okay, to be honest, I'm I could make a bit about groaning about watching a movie like this, but I actually, I'm interested to see it. I vaguely remember coming across the book as a kid in our library and being like, oh, that movie is based on a book. Interesting. It's one of those really old books about a long time ago. So a lot of that stuff, I genuinely am interested in seeing things like this or being exposed to some of those older stories, because for a long time, I just really had no interest in it for whatever reason. I think I'm just a spoiled fucking millennial. I'm just past Gen X, whatever, however that shit works. But I really only kind of cared about contemporary things, maybe a decade or two back, and the future. But when you start talking about 1800s, then I would check out immediately. Now, as a mature adult who's capable of, thinking things through a little bit more, I actually am kind of, the more I'm being exposed to, older things, I'm finding something in there I like. So yeah, honestly, I am interested to see this. I hope it'll be good. I'm looking at the cast list. There's a bunch of names here I recognize that I like, so at least it'll certainly have that going for it. Yeah,
I think, or I hope you'll appreciate the relationships and the dynamics of those relationships in this movie, because I think they're really strong and really interesting. And even if the subject matter is not your typical bag, I think you'll appreciate, it's solid writing, solid directing, really strong performances. So I'm hoping you like it, but I'm really, really curious to hear after we watch this what your thoughts are. So
I suspect if this movie works well, my notes are going to be like just a bunch of paragraphs about each character and their relationship to each other and what their personality is and all that stuff. Which if it does well, I'll enjoy.
That's true. Yeah, I think... I mean, I do think that a lot of stuff happens. I mean, it is really the story of 4 women and they're all the people that they know and love over, like I said, several decades. So it is a lot of stuff happens in this movie.
What kind of effects are we talking here? Like, is it, do we got miniatures? Do we got models? Do we got, do we get early CGI?
This is a lot of CGI in this one. I'm curious to see if all the CGI holds up.
They digitally de-aged the women to make them littler.
Oh man. Yeah, thankfully no CGI in this one. Not that I'm aware of. But I think that's good. We've done a lot of movies lately where there's been a lot of effects, maybe not CGI, but this is a little more back to basics. So
I want to use my brain. I don't want
and your
flashy
heart.
colors.
And your heart, Jason.
All right.
All right. Well, let's go watch this. And I honestly cannot wait to hear what you have to say about Little Women. All right, we're back. We have just watched Little Women. Jason, I am so curious. What did you think of Little Women?
I liked it overall. I enjoyed it. I think it's a good movie. So I watched it twice. The first time I watched it, I thought it was okay. The first kind of half hour took me a while to like really connect with it or get into it. I was like honestly dreading it. Like the opening, no, I was looking forward to watching it, but once it started and like the opening credit showed up and the music started playing and it's, you know, I see the family in the house. I'm like, oh no, like this is not going to be for me. But as it went on, I started to enjoy it a lot more. I ended up watching it a second time just because I felt like I didn't get it the first time. And I think that's because like with Blade Runner, when that story, I find the whole time it's helped by understanding the characters and who they are and you know, and the journey they go on and all that kind of stuff. And after I kind of grasped that, it sort of made the whole story work a lot better for me. I don't know. Sometimes movies just like the second time I see them, I know exactly what to sort of expect in terms of like, these are the things that are going to happen. And it just helps me process it better. So, yeah, it was good. I enjoyed it. The thing that maybe didn't work so well about it was, so I was reading about it on Wikipedia, and the book it is based on is 2 books combined into 1 book that is like 730 pages or something like that. And I definitely got the impression watching this movie that I was seeing a lot of stuff condensed into a relatively short amount of time. So that I kind of understand like these are the plot points that happen, but I feel like there's so much more kind of behind it that would have kind of I could just tell I'm missing a lot of stuff from the actual book. I also went and watched 30 minutes of the 2019 version of Little Women, and I won't spoil it for you if you don't want me to, but I will say seeing that movie just has a completely different take on it in terms of like structuring. Like it's going back and forth in time from the get-go. It's not like a linear story. And that completely kind of like solves the problems I had with this original version. Just in the sense of like not, I shouldn't say solve actually. I think the way the original one does it is better. Anyway, I'll get into that later, but it's a good movie. I liked it. It's about the characters. I almost cried a bunch of times.
But you didn't go there?
I got weepy-eyed. No tears actually fell down my face, but the eyes were getting red.
Oh boy, so like as soon as those opening credits started and the music started, I started crying. This is like it's just one of those movies. I'm going to have trouble being objective about this one because it's so close to my heart. It's just, it feels like Christmas and home and again, I have 2 sisters, so it's very much, it's probably a lot more relatable for me than it is to you, who you don't have siblings and you are a man. So, yeah. Okay. So I know you were talking about the characters. Do you want to sort of just dive into the characters and talk about them a little bit, and then we can sort of talk about like what actually happened and what kind of worked and what didn't for us.
Sure.
So actually, my first question for you actually is, which March sister are you, Jason?
Oh man, I don't know. I think they all have something about them that I can maybe identify with a little bit. Like I don't know. I mean, I'm going to say like Jo's the cool one. Like she's the go-getter. She's going to go have a writing career. Like that's pretty cool. I don't think I'm as like driven as her, so I don't feel like good comparing myself to her. But I don't know. Yeah, I'm going to go with Jo.
Okay. How about this? Are you a Laurie or a Mr. Brooks?
Wait, Mr. Brooks is Eric Stoltz?
Yeah.
You barely get to know him, so he's just kind of like, he's a guy.
He's a guy. All right. So you're talking about Jo. So there's the four sisters, obviously, are the center of the story. Jo is kind of our protagonist, I guess. We follow her more than anyone else. Jo is kind of the cool one. I kind of like Jo. My notes were she's an angry night owl who hates her job, sucks at clothes and hair, and wants transformation without change, which is very relatable to me. I think Winona Ryder also does such a great job at portraying Jo. Okay, so this movie also, I'm going to also talk about Marmee. So I'm going to just bring these two in together. Marmee's the best, right? We love Marmee.
Oh, she's great.
Susan Sarandon's great. And then she just brings so much. She's so compassionate, but she's just a badass at the same time. And I was thinking watching her as well as Jo, if they were, particularly Marmee, was she this progressive in the books, or it's been such a long time since I've read the books, over 20 years for sure. Or if this is a 90s version of Marmee and our 90s version of Jo. I don't know. What did you feel that at all watching this?
I was kind of wondering that because is this movie a reflection of like 90s politics? The impression I get from what I read is that Louise Alcott, the author, I hope I got that name right.
Louisa May Alcott.
Yeah, that was certainly her politics. Like, I think she was pretty open about that. So I kind of get the impression that is contained in the original story. I would be surprised if all of that, because it comes up multiple times, just dialogue from Marmee, and like the scene with Jo later in the movie when she's like with the guys at the university and she's like explaining women should be able to vote because they're women, not because they're good. If that was all just like in the 1994 screenplay, I'd be very surprised, because that would feel like a pretty bold thing to add. Now I get the impression that was in the original.
Yeah. So we're all fans of Marmee and Jo. We have Meg. Don't look at my ankles, March. She really doesn't have much to do in this movie.
Yeah, so I would say of the characters in this movie, the ones that I sort of understood the best by the end were Jo. She kind of gets the most time, the most sort of like story. I mean, Marmee is pretty, you get what she's all about. And I think like Susan Sarandon, her like personality really brings a lot of that to it as well. Beth, I understand what Beth is about, and she goes on a journey, but she's pretty straightforward. But Meg and Amy confused me. Meg, Meg didn't confuse me. Meg, I just sort of didn't quite get what she was about. Like the note I wrote was boring oldest sister.
Hey.
Now I have a note here from the book. Meg is 16 when the story starts. She's referred to as a beauty and manages the household when her mother is absent. I guess that's in the story. Although you don't get the impression she's in charge. Like, it seems like the family is kind of collectively taking care of things.
Yeah.
Meg fulfills the expectations for women at the time. From the start, she's already a nearly perfect little woman in the eyes of the world. Before her marriage to John Brooke, she often lectures her younger sisters to ensure they grow up to embody the title of little women. So that character sounds like, that I understand. Like, okay, she's like the traditional, this is the role women do. I'm going to, try and get you to do it as well. And that's certainly what she wants. In the movie, I didn't quite get that impression. Like, she didn't come across as overwhelmingly like, I'm a trad wife and that's what I'm looking for.
I get that impression from her. Like, I definitely feel like she wants to be proper and she wants to be seen by... Her and Amy are interesting because I think they want similar things, in that Meg, she clearly wants that sort of white picket fence life, I guess we could call it. She wants to be seen a certain way, but she also has these incredibly strong morals and values, which I think drive her. Whereas Amy, I think, also wants to be seen a certain way, but she's just like, fuck it. I want to go to France and I want to paint and I want to wear beautiful things. And I'm
not going to marry a poor guy.
Yeah, fuck that. So I think to me, they almost... I didn't really think about it until we're just talking about it right now. So I feel like, yeah, Amy's, I feel, is also like, she's really ambitious. Whereas Meg, she's like, let's keep things how they are. Let's not progress. Let's do our duty, like you were saying. Whereas Amy wants a more expansive experience. But at the end of the day, it's almost like they do want the same thing. They want to be seen in a certain way by the right people.
I get the feeling that Meg seems more interested in having, the quote unquote traditional life, because that's what she wants to do. Like she just wants to have a family and have a house and, whereas Amy, it seems more like, I guess it's like, I know people that got married young and had families and stuff like that, and that's just kind of what they did. And then I also know people that got married young and had families, and their Facebook feed was like all about that and all about like their huge house and sort of like lifestyle and all that kind of shit. And I think that's maybe the difference I see here, whereas like Amy comes across as more like, she's a brand.
Amy would be a social media influencer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so what would Meg be doing? Would she be like, I'm not a feminist? Would she be voting for Trump?
No. Meg would definitely be voting for Hillary Clinton. She just would be like, she wouldn't have a Twitter account. She'd be pretty quiet on Facebook. She'd just be, working an administration job with a decent, middle class salary.
I agree. I think Meg would also be one of those people who would say, we're not talking about politics at the dinner table.
Yeah, maybe.
She just wants things to be proper and neat, and she doesn't want to get too raw with things. But it is interesting, like with this connection she has with her sisters, like she still does dress up and put on these performances with them and has fun with them. But which is why I think there is some element of Meg who does want to be like that. She wants to be seen a certain way.
She doesn't want to be a dried up old spinster.
Yeah. She's like, I can't be running around showing my ankles and running and talking about corsets and limes all day like the rest of you heathens.
But I think, like, I don't know if it's so much about she's concerned about how she's seen by others for the purpose of being seen versus she wants to meet a guy, get married, and have a family. Like, I think that is the driving part of that, is not necessarily like ego, but
no,
just that, like, I have a goal I want to accomplish, so I got to be proper in all these things and this and that. Versus like with Amy, it seems a little bit more like maybe, well, I don't know. This is where I'm maybe mixing a detail from the other version I saw, because I feel like in that version, she definitely comes across as way more like Instagram influencer. Like I literally think that's what the performance kind of looked like when you first meet her. But that, yeah, like Amy would be, she's a bit more bratty, I guess.
She's a definite brat. Yeah, absolutely. She wants what she wants and she's going to get it. And she does.
So something
for her
that I think totally did not work with this movie is the two different people playing Amy. Yeah. Just because I feel like, I mean, that could have worked. I think, you can definitely cast two different people to play the same role. I think it's really tough because the time difference was only 4 years between them. So, I mean, it's effectively like the same person for the most part, just a little bit older. So, the fact that they don't look the same, I don't think that matters, but like the performances were just so different. They're two totally different characters in that first half and the second half.
Yeah, I don't know. I was thinking about this because I saw this in your notes, and I completely see what you are saying. Second, Amy really always bored me as a character when I was younger and would watch this movie. I feel though like when we first meet Amy, she's a kid. Like she is a kid, and then she does grow up into a woman. And I think she has worked on becoming who she wants to be rather than who she really is by this point. So I think for me, maybe that's what they're trying to get across to us, is this transformation of I'm going to become who I want to become, rather than grow more into myself naturally, which is something we see maybe like Joe doing or Beth doing, as long as Beth makes it. But with Amy, I feel like maybe that's what we're being asked to accept, is her creation of her new self as she wants the world to, as she wants to be in the world, maybe, you know?
Interesting. I did not get any of that from her. Like, yeah, when she's young, she's a kid, and like I really like Kirsten Dunst's performance there. Like she's got a lot of personality. She the whole bit about the limes was fucking great. Yeah, it's nothing but limes now. If you don't bring limes to school, you're nothing. You might as well be dead. That's a great, like, that's one of those things that makes this movie or the story actually feel very universal. Is just like, oh, limes are the bullshit in school that everyone's trading around and fighting over, and then they get taken away, and she's like, oh, these lovely limes, I'm perfectly desolated. Like that line in that moment, like there's a lot of character there, but the later version, the performance is just very like, you know, she's kind of. Not a lot of charisma going on there. And I guess I didn't really get an impression. I didn't perceive this thing where like she's mature now and she's doing what she wants. And I thought like something traumatic had happened to her. And like, it was such a change in personality. I think also there's a scene later on when Laurie shows up to like propose to her after Beth has died. The place she's at, is that supposed to be a school or something? Because I thought it was like a sanatorium or something. Like it totally looked like, maybe I'm just being like super sexist, but like, you know, old stories of like the women would get sent to sanatoriums because they were like sad. But like, I think that was a result of the performance and like the character, you know, like, yeah. And in terms of transformation, I didn't perceive that, because she was just like, well, I want to get married and, you know, I'm going to marry this kind of boring guy, but he's stable. And that's that. Which doesn't seem all that different from her when she was younger.
Yeah, I agree. But I don't think she could have been as, I don't think she could have carried on being who she was and get the things that she wants from her perspective. So I think she does sort of become this other person. That's how I've always read it anyway. But I agree that the second Amy is a very boring, wooden, lifeless performance. Like she has no expression. She doesn't even give us a glimpse of former Amy, even when she's sort of letting her guard down with Laurie, which was a bit disappointing. Even when she comes home, you know, at the very end, when she's talking to Joe and she's like, are you pissed at me because I married your kind of almost love? She's just like, oh, Joe. Like, she doesn't break that sort of wall she's put up at all. So I definitely see where you're coming from. That's my least favorite performance in this, is second Amy. But I guess I've always read it like she's moving forward and she's determined to get what she wants. And this is how she believes she will get that, is to become this woman that women are supposed to be at this time.
Okay, that I agree with. The way you phrased it there. Maybe I was misunderstanding what you were saying before. I think that is like what she's doing. I really think it's just a problem of casting here. Like, I think if Kirsten Dunst, I don't know, if she was a couple years older when they filmed it, and they're just like, just pretend you're a kid in the first half, and then she was like an adult in this section, I think it could totally work. obviously she has changed. It would be totally normal, and I suspect the book is like this, where she's a kid in this section, she's 4 years, she's an adult in this section, she has matured, she's not as bratty, right. She's not as obnoxious, but just because they have a different performer and they just kind of are a different person, it just doesn't the personality is not there. So it seems like it's not just a change in maturing, but it's such a dramatic change in personality that's why it felt like something really bad had happened to her.
So I know we're missing a sister, but we'll come back to her because I kind of want to talk to Laurie and his transformation while we're talking about Amy, because I loved Laurie, or Teddy, throughout the movie up until we meet him in France and he's like full douche mode at this point. I hate him till the end of the movie. And all the scenes with Amy and Laurie are so, I think the kids would say cringy or cringeworthy at this point. I hate watching them. But up until that point, I really love Laurie. But I agree with you. Like, while Amy seems like a very abrupt change and there's no sort of consistency there, Laurie is still himself. It's still Christian Bale playing Laurie. It's just this different version of Laurie that we're getting.
I was a little confused by what was going on with Laurie. Like the change part. So like, yeah, in the first half of the movie, he's like friends with the girls next door. Like he's obviously interested in them as girls, but also like they have a genuine friendship. It seems like the kind of relationship he has with them where it's almost brotherly as well. And then, yeah, the second half, that was one of those parts where I felt like maybe the book just would make all this connect a bit more or feel a bit more fleshed out. But like he shows up and meets Amy and he's just like, he's got like bad facial hair and he's like, I'm sick of life. Well, he's basically, it's kind of funny that it's Christian Bale because he's basically playing Batman in the first Christopher Nolan Batman. There's a scene where like, he's Bruce Wayne, but he's actually Batman, and he wants people to think he's stupid. So he's at a party, and he's just kind of like acting like a drunk, blowhard. So he's kind of doing that routine here. But I don't know. I was like, wait, what's going on? Why is he like this? Like, and then his whole like pursuit of Amy it didn't feel natural to me.
Yeah, it was very Isabel 2 styles, like from Legends of the Fall, of like, here's this young woman that he knew when she was a child, and then he sees her when she's a grown-up, and he's like, let's get to business, which I always hate anyway in literature or on film. But yeah, I feel like there was a real disconnect there. I think maybe it is in part because of the Amy situation, like the casting of her, because there was no connection. It would have been different if we would have seen Amy sort of revert back to her true self or show her personality a bit more. But I do think that this is someplace where the books would have filled in some gaps, or because it seems very quick and very abrupt and like there's no real reason for it. And if some guy like was in love with one of my sisters for like his entire young, adulthood, and then all of a sudden was like, oh, you're here now, want to do this, I'd probably have more questions. But it's also that thing of like Laurie always, knew he was part of the family and would marry a March girl. And they do have that moment early on when Beth first gets sick and Amy and Kirsten Dunst, Amy and Laurie are in the carriage. And she's like, I don't want to die before I've been kissed. And he's like, I'll kiss you. I promise I'll kiss you before you die. So we kind of see some foreshadowing there, but it's weird. I don't like it. I hate Laurie at this point. I hate the new Amy too. Like, I'll be honest, I really don't like her.
I think this also fails because of Amy too. I think from what I've read of the story, it's like, Laurie, there was a sentence I saw that described it as like, he's older and he sees her in a new light. I mean, obviously she's older too, but like, people do change after time. And I think that actually, this does feel realistic in the sense that like, I could totally see this being how, one would end up marrying someone, you know, like
Right.
they were in love with one person and then
Yeah.
things change. And it's kind of a sign of like, I guess, maturity in a sense. Like
Mm-hmm.
the way he talks about it, he does sort of like make it clear. He's like, I'm not in love with her anymore. I just, I want to be in love and I want to be married. And I believed in there. I did believe that like this wasn't some weird hang up
Yeah.
over Joe, and whatever,
Right. Yeah.
whatever had changed in him that made him, you know, want to marry Amy was real. And he does go on a quest to like, he writes her the letter saying like, I'm going to go be a better man. And I'm going to prove to you that like, that this is the real deal.
Tale as old as time.
Yeah. Which I think is kind of sweet and legitimate. You know, I mean, that could also, there's a way that could come across as a little fucked up, but like, I don't see it that way in this case. But I think like, yeah, I think the problem here again is the performance, because like the scene with him and Kirsten Dunst, like she's got like personality, there's chemistry between them there, you know, and like not in a gross way, you know, like he is like the older brother to her in that moment, but it's a very like sweet scene, you know, it's and I could imagine those two years later, like, okay, this eventually turned into a marriage, but like in this movie, Amy too is just like this sort of this poor woman. I feel bad shit talking this actress, but like she just, I don't know if it's bad direction or what, but she's just so like, you know,
she's just there.
Yeah.
She looks pretty.
So that's what makes it all confusing
lines
to me, I guess, is like,
yeah,
I just don't sort of buy everything there. But I think in the story, narrative wise, it totally does make sense. I can comprehend that. And I think by the end of the movie, I don't know, I like to think towards the very end, he has changed. You don't really, you know, you see him as like kind of a jerk. There's like the scene where he's like, yeah, you should marry me. And he's drinking from the flask, looking like Trent Reznor in the mid 90s with his facial hair. But then and then he's like, okay, fine. And then he goes off and, you know, writes a letter and says, I'm going to go be a better man and blah, blah, blah. And then you sort of have to fill in the blanks, really, because like you see him next when he shows up after Beth has died. And then you see him at the end when he introduces their marriage. So like at that point, you kind of, there's no time for real character development to have happened. So you don't really know what Laurie is like at that point in the movie. I like to think he is, you know, he's not being a whiny, he's matured, you know, he's going to be a married, responsible man now.
Yeah, I think we just see Laurie lose his way a little bit. And I think that his home and his friendships and his connection to this family actually do ground him. And I don't hate Laurie. I just hate watching him from the second half. Until when we see him in France onward, I'm just like, get a grip, Laurie.
Yeah, he is unlikable.
Better than this.
He does totally shit talk Amy's painting as he's deprecating his music. He's like, it's just a copy of something good.
Yeah, he's a real hipster type at this point.
Yeah.
Okay, so we skipped over Beth.
Should we cry
Beth,
now?
who is too pure for the world. I know. Her story is obviously really heartbreaking. I found she's not given a lot either. I found this for the first time. I found her, not necessarily her performance, but sort of how she's written into this version, a little bit one note. Like every time we see her, it's just this really almost pathetic, desperate, sickly girl. And we don't get too much of who she actually is, which I guess is sort of part of what Beth's personality is she's there to support everybody else. She even, like, in her little her last words, which I lost my mind at, she really does say, like, I never really had like the ambition and saw myself in the future doing great things. I just kind of like being at home. So maybe that's just really on point for Beth, but it's sad. It's a sad state for Beth.
Yeah, no, it's definitely tragic. You know, the first time I watched it, I didn't have a like super strong emotional reaction. I was like, oh, okay, this is obviously very sad. Actually, okay, let me backtrack for a second here. I want to say something. This movie has, you'd think there are no villains in this movie. You are wrong. There are two villains, and their name are the fucking Hummels. Because as soon as this young girl who brings them their food every year and more, she shows up and they're just like, our baby is sick, and they just shove it in her face, and she's like, distraught, crying, and then like next scene, I don't feel good.
That scene is so one of my sisters hates it also. Like, it's so upsetting. I feel physically ill when I watch that scene. And that, first of all, that baby is fucking enormous. I don't know where they got that baby, but it's huge. And it looks
That's
like
probably
a fucking
some kind
Frankenstein baby.
Regulation about like the age of babies that you're allowed to employ. So it's actually like a 1-year-old.
It just looks so strange. Claire Danes is... Okay, I used to hate Claire Danes. Hate. I was like, get her off my screens. I hate her. I can't stand this. I have so much appreciation for her, like now as an adult. She is not afraid to get ugly and real. And she, like her expressions in this, I think that's like, I have a physical reaction watching it because I feel what she is feeling. And I'm just like, no, you poor thing, get out of there, drop that baby and run.
Claire Danes is really good at crying. And I mean that. I only know her from one other thing, which is the show Homeland, which I watched multiple seasons of. And it's kind of funny because on that show, her character has bipolar disorder. And so goes on like big mood swings. So like she'll be like crying, she'll be yelling, like she'll be manic, which like Claire Danes does really well. And watching this, I was like, oh, wow, she really she's good at crying.
Yeah, she's great. I think, they need someone to cry. They're like, call Claire.
Yeah. But I actually think like she's really good, I think, for this role. Beth is like, her personality is sort of like a cloud. And I don't mean like a dark cloud. I just sort of mean like, she's just sort of like this sort of like floating, soft, supportive, person that is kind of like around everybody all the time. And, and as she's dying, her, like, she's just, sort of speaking softly and saying these like really tragic things. Yeah. Where she's like, I wasn't making plans about the great things I do. I never saw myself as much. Why does everyone want to go away? I love being home. I don't love being left behind. Now I'm the one going ahead. Fucking, there's the tears right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so she's described her self-sacrifice is ultimately the greatest in the novel. She gives up her life knowing that it has had only private domestic meaning. And I think like that's... When I first watched the movie, I kind of didn't get that. And then I read that and it just sort of like helped me understand really what was going on there. Yeah, that her, unlike her sisters who are like, Jo's ambitious, she's going to be a writer, she's getting out there in the world, gets her name recognized and all that kind of stuff. And the other two are, going to have families and all that stuff. She just kind of exists only within the world of this family. And that's kind of all she really needs and all she really wants. And then tragically sort of dies, never even had the opportunity to sort of expand beyond that, I don't know. That really makes me feel emotions.
Yeah. Beth brings up a lot. You're right. We don't see her with other people, except for the doctor, obviously. And that scene, that Christmas scene, which I was hysterical over, where Mr. Lawrence gives her the piano and Teddy's friends from school are there. I think that's the only time we see her interact with anyone, except for the Hummels, obviously. Yeah.
I also do want to point out in my research, apparently that whole thing with the Hummels is not like, it doesn't play out where they just stick a baby in their face. Like, obviously she goes there all the time. And I think like she had been there for some amount of time while the baby was sick. I guess they just had to condense that into like one quick.
And the baby's losing it. And oh my God. I always think when I watch movies where babies cry, I'm like, do they pinch them? Do they make them like, do they just wait until the baby cries? Like, how do they manage that? I want to know, but maybe I don't.
Yeah, they probably have a lot of rules around that, I would hope.
Oh, for sure.
I also want to say that the makeup on Beth was really good. Like, they did a very good job of sort of portraying her as like weak and sickly.
I agree. Yeah, it didn't look like makeup. It just looked like a sick woman.
They made her pale.
I think that all of the design elements in this were so beautiful. Like, speaking of makeup, hair, costume, all the locations and the sets, everything. Like, I felt like I could I feel like I can smell the movie. Like, I think the world is so well constructed. Like, even if somebody doesn't like this story or it's not really for them, which I completely understand, I think that you can still like really appreciate well, for me anyway, I'm completely transported when I watch this movie, and it isn't anything flashy, and it isn't anything like there are no special effects or anything like that. It's just the world they've created feels so real and allows these characters to really take sort of center stage for me.
Yeah, I agree. I think the you spend a lot of time in the house and in the attic and stuff like that, and that all feels very believable, like a real place. It feels like a real house that they're all living in, and all the other locations and stuff like that. I don't know anything about like historical accuracy. I believe they went to great effort to try and make it accurate, but it looks good. I think it all looks great.
Yeah, and I like how there are a lot of little details, even aside from the main story. Like, at one point, Joe goes out to get the mail, and a carriage goes by, and this guy like turns and checks her out, and maybe he's like, "Why is that woman running? How unladylike!"
Call the police.
Yeah. At the party, one of the parties with the rich bitches, there are kids like spitting and throwing things over the railings, and just like very specific moments that the actors have. Like, one for me is when Amy throws herself at her father's feet when he comes home, and she kind of like melts down his leg. All those little details, I thought, like, just add so much. And I think when I was watching it like with a more critical eye this time, I really noticed them more than ever, because before they just help, again, like add to this world that is created that these women are living in, thinking about the logistics and how, okay, kids, you're going to spit this out of your mouth, and then the camera's going to go here, and then you kids are going to throw this, and then you're going to come down the stairs, and then everybody's going to be like, just the amount of work that it would take to get those little details right, kind of in this viewing, when I was looking for things like that, just really impressed me. I just really appreciate how this is directed, because there's some really beautiful shots as well. But again, like nothing flashy or no tricks, nothing that's taking away from just the story that's being told.
Yeah, I agree. One of those little details I liked was the scene right before they're all going to school, where Amy is complaining about limes and stuff. They're like, "Oh, we're late," and then they just show a shot of the school and a window, and there's two kids in the window, and one of them just like blows raspberries on it. Like, they're just making stupid faces, and like that just felt like a very believable detail of being a kid. And you're like, "Oh, fuck, I'm late," and then there's like, "Oh, those are those two asshole kids, and they're making fun of me." And but the style of it is like, yeah, the way it's presented is very straightforward, I would say. There's not a lot of flashy stuff going on, which, works for what it is. Like, yeah. That is the right decision, I think.
Absolutely. Okay, so I guess, so that's the end of the podcast. We've talked about all the characters.
Oh, I haven't talked about all the characters.
Okay, so should we just maybe talk about what this story actually is? So we actually, and then these other sort of supporting characters come in. So I like how everything is established. It's like really early on. Like you said, the first half hour for you is maybe not great, but I also think that it does a great job of just establishing, like, we're in Concord, Massachusetts. It's the like mid to late 1800s. We hear that, once this family was one of the finest families in town. Now they're in a temporary poverty. Dad is off at war. And we really, that, I think the reason maybe that first half hour is not as exciting is because it's really just establishing who these girls are and their personalities maybe, and establishing what the situation is for all of them. Again, that lime, I think that's when things really start kicking up, is that that scene with the limes where Amy doesn't want to go to school without limes because they're all the rage. And she gets chastised for it. She gets smacked on the hand.
Mm-hmm.
And my God, their teacher said, it's as useful to educate a woman as to educate a female cat. And I love this scene because Amy just knows how to like piss Jo off. Like she knows. And she's like, I'm going to get these ladies. I'm going to get my feminist mom and sisters riled up and they're going to tear a strip out of this dickhead.
Wait, was Amy the one who brought up that line about educating a cat? Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, she's like, and my teacher said.
Oh, wow.
It's as useful. Yeah. So she knows what's up. She's a smart little manipulative brat.
Yeah, and that's sort of where you get like the politics of Marmee kind of come out clear.
Yeah.
And she's great because she's just like, this is bullshit, like Joe's like, we should go there and fucking beat him up. Like she just wanted to like fight him, and Marmee's like, whoa, hold on. Like, little wiser, knows how to approach these things, and she's like, I'll write a strongly worded letter. Back in the day when that actually meant something.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of like and you're sort of seeing like her influence on her kids right there, like her
yes.
Her being a good role model.
Yeah, she's great. I love how quickly she wrote that letter. She was like, "Dear Mr. Whatever," and then she says, "Okay, you're gonna not go back to that school. Jo will supervise your learning."
Yeah,
which neither
Amy's
of them
like
is happy about.
Initially, she's like, "Yeah, do you think you could learn at home?" And she's like, "Yeah." Like she's pretty psyched about not going back to school. She's like, "Great, Joe's gonna tutor you," and she's like, "Fuck."
Yeah, I love their relationship, like Amy 1 and Jo.
Yeah,
it feels very real. As a sister, gotta say, it feels very real, that relationship. So then, yeah, we go to a couple of parties. The first one is where Jo really meets Laurie, because up until this point, he's just been kind of this mystery boy next door who's living with their rich, proper neighbor, Mr. Lawrence. So he's his nephew?
No, I think he's the grandson, and his parents have died.
Oh, okay. Oh, fuck. Okay. So he's been in Europe, and he comes home. I love the party. I love Jo. Like, she's got, like, first she, like, burns Meg's hair off, and she's got a big old stain on the back of her dress. And I like how everything in that scene is handled. Ginger boy looking at her, trying to...
Yeah, okay, that guy looks like Adam Devine from Workaholics. Like, he's got the same face. And I was just like, I just love that casting, because I was like, I know everything that guy's about.
Yeah, and so does Jo. She's like, nah.
Peace.
Yeah. So then she meets Laurie. They're fast friends. And I think this is interesting. So it sort of sets up Laurie and Jo's relationship for later. Like Jo she's clearly not really interested in Laurie, but as soon as he, says something about Meg and how he thinks she's attractive, Jo throws in a line of like, oh, well, she's completely bald in front. So she also doesn't want, and I guess maybe it's more about she doesn't want Meg to have any suitors more than her feelings for Laurie, but
yeah, she is not happy about who Meg ends up with, which is something I also don't totally understand, just because that character is like not fleshed out at all. But she's like, oh, this boring twerp somehow ended up in our family.
I think it's more that Jo legitimately doesn't want any other outsiders coming into their family. That's how I've always read it. Of like, she says a lot, like, why must things change? Why can't they just stay the same? I don't know that it's even necessarily about him. I think it's more about Jo just not wanting to lose her sister.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Which I also understand. Mr. Brooks is pretty dorky, though. I love that scene after the party and Laurie and Mr. Brooks are hanging out. And or first of all, there's like a snowball fight and Laurie is playing with the girls and they're all just like making a lot of noise. And he's like, oh, one hopes your girls will be a gentling influence, as they're like slinging snowballs and yelling and screaming. So I think those are cute touches. I think that's when Marmee also goes off on corsets.
Yeah, she's like, girls are the same as boys in their need for exertion, feminist weakness, and fainting spells are the direct result of our confining girls to house, needlework, and corsets. She just like throws that out there, and then Meg is like, Mom!
Don't embarrass me, Mom. But Mr. Brooks doesn't have too much to say. That he's kind of a little, like, he's a pretty passive guy. And I don't think he really... like he's not someone, I think, to challenge anyone else. Like, I love that... that scene with Laurie afterwards where Laurie is watching the women and Mr. Brooks is tutoring him, and he's like, what do you think they do in that house all day? And Mr. Brooks is like, oh, over the mysteries of female life there is drawn a veil best left undisturbed. So I don't think he's the type of guy who would like leave the door open in the bathroom, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I think him and Meg actually do seem like a pretty good pairing in that they're both like sort of casually traditional about things. They're like, this is the way things work. We just want to do it that way.
They're both boring.
Yeah.
They're kind of dull.
He's like, hey, I was the original Marty McFly. Did you know that?
Poor Eric Stoll. So yeah, I like how Laurie's relationship with the girls kind of develops, and he's sort of invited into their inner circle. Like he kind of goes beyond the veil. When Joe just brings him into their little troupe of performers, and they go in their attic and dress up. And I think it's such a sweet relationship that they all have with him, actually.
Yeah, I think that like when he proposes to her later in the movie, I was kind of caught off guard. I was not surprised on the one hand, but also like the way the relationship seems to be up to that point does seem very much just like family, like it doesn't, I didn't get the impression that anybody was particularly interested in anyone. And maybe in the book, it would be interesting to see like what that relationship looks like. I just, in the movie, you don't have a ton to work with on that front. But what you see is very like, yeah, it's a nice kind of like, it does feel like they're all family.
Yeah. I like Laurie here. Laurie's just like full on, like ready for whatever these like girls throw at him. He's like, this is great. Let's do it. And then so I feel like this is kind of where things start getting a little more real and sad, is when Amy's really pissed off about not being able to go to the theater and threatens Joe. And while Joe and Meg are out, Amy throws Joe's manuscript in the fire. And they have a big blowout. Like this moment I wrote, this is so real. This is like a fights that I've had with my sister. And you can tell like when Joe comes home, Amy's just sitting there like she's waiting. She's waiting for this moment because she knows exactly how Joe is going to react. And this little brat, she plays the victim so well. I love this moment. But it's kind of sad. I think that is a moment where even though they make up later, when Amy falls through the ice and Joe saves her, I think that's sort of I think it's a really important moment of like recognizing how much siblings can hurt one another and how far sometimes they go to do that, and how often they do make up, but sometimes there's damage done there. I think a sibling relationship is really unique, and I think this movie captures a lot of that really well, of what relationships with sisters often, I mean, obviously everybody's different, but often do look like. There's often conflict.
So I don't have any brothers or sisters, and I've said before, like, those relationships are kind of foreign to me. And I say that because I've observed them and just been like baffled by it, because, I have friends that are brothers, and like I would hang out with them and they spent tons of time around each other, and God, they fought with each other so much in a way that I was like, if you were my friend and we behaved around each other like this, I would be like, we would not be fucking friends. Like that would not happen. So, and really like that is the tie of family, is just like, they're your fucking brother or sister. You just got to deal with it. Like, you're not cutting them out. So, and I think like, I get what you're saying, that that was such a like cruel thing for her to do to her sister. I kind of got the impression that as soon as like Joe started freaking out, she realized like she had fucked up and like maybe this was a bad idea. They do resolve it pretty quick though, because that ice scene is like immediately after that. And as soon as like they were skating and she's like, wait for me, I'm like, oh, I thought she was going to die. I was like, she's going to die and this is now going to get really tragic.
That would have been really awful. But you put your money on the wrong sister dying.
Yeah, I did because that's what I was predicting, and I didn't see Beth coming at all. Well, until she went to the Hummels. Then I was like, oh, she's dead.
Yeah, and that actually, well, before that happens, I guess, a big thing that does occur is Sally Moffat's coming out party. This is the rich bitch.
I fucking love that scene in the dressing room. She is like, is that character Sally Moffat? Whoever she is. Okay, she's...
Oh, no, she's not. Sally is the one eating cakes at the beginning. And she's like, Sally Moffat, you will not be able to, lace your dress, blah, 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 whatever.
Yeah, she's like, you're going to get fat. Like, that's like her whole character is just like, either explicitly or passive aggressively just shit talking everyone. Like she says like, so Meg is there at the party and she shows up in her dress and she's like, that's the nicest I've seen that fabric since the war broke out. And then like is sort of like chastising her for like not buying silk because they have views on slavery, and didn't they have to close the school because they admitted a dark girl? Like very like, and then like, what did she say? The poor are always with us. You are so good to remind us. And I love that because she's very clearly like insinuating that they're poor.
Yeah. Oh yeah, she's such a bitch. And it's interesting to watch Meg sort of fall victim to this mean girl and, put on the dress and the corsets and the makeup and run into Laurie at the party, where he's kind of a douche here at the party too, but
yeah, he really digs into her.
I think though I think it is like almost like a brother would though. He's like, this isn't who you are. What are you doing? It's almost in a way validating for her of like, who you are is fine. Why are you putting on these things? There's a shot of her taking off her lipstick, which I think is such a beautiful, it's just like a black background. One of those little details that I love in this scene. But I like this scene too, because it shows Laurie and Meg really bonding a little bit too. And people walk by while they're sort of hiding in a room and talk about how she's throwing herself at him, and they kind of just have a laugh over it. All the relationships seem very natural, like they seem very real. That's what I really like about this too, is it feels like a conversation you would have. Or does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think maybe just the way it's presented in the movie, kind of something feels a bit funky about it, just because like I don't think I get what was happening was like she gets all dressed up. She's like, I'm gonna make you my pet, which is another like, oh my god, I hate her. But she gets all dolled up, and then she's like kind of doing the thing and like meeting the guys. And I think it's meant to be more like maybe she's supposed to be a little bit more sort of obnoxious or like leaning into it. Whereas I found like the actress and sort of the way she did it, I was like, she wasn't doing anything that wrong. Like I didn't. So when Laurie comes in and is like, cover yourself up, you whore. Like that was a bit, it felt a bit much, but I understand what it was supposed to be.
I think to me there was a bit of tension there too, maybe that I read as in like, I think Laurie is really in love with these women. It like, or where is his line of loving these women as family and friends, and where is his line of like falling in love with these women and sort of almost being a little bit fixated on the March sisters. So I kind of read more of that into that scene, I guess. So I didn't think he was that harsh, and it was more in a brotherly way, is sort of how I read that also, of him just and maybe he's had a few drinks. We're getting glimpses of the douche within. I don't know.
Suddenly, as he's talking to her, the mustache and little soul patch is just growing in. See faint outlines of it. Oh my god. So yeah, so she goes home,
Everything's all good. And then Laurie goes off to school and Marmee goes off to see their dad who's injured. And I love this scene when Jo comes back and she reveals that she sold her hair to pay for the train ticket. And little bitch Amy's like, Jo, you're one beauty.
Beautiful.
There's a lot about the hair. Like even later that night, Jo's up crying and sweet Beth wakes up and she's like, are you thinking about father? And Jo's just like, my hair. So I love that scene. I think it's so cute. It's so charming.
Yeah. Unfortunately, this I think is the point where the movie starts to get real. And like once people start leaving and moving, it's like life, like once you are at a point where you're like happy and cozy and life is good. And then like adulthood hits, reality hits, and people start moving and disconnecting. And once those things happen, you're like, eventually you realize, oh, things aren't going to be the same again, which, Jo basically says later in the movie, like, are we ever all going to be together again?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And I think for Jo, a theme for her is really like change. Like she uses the words transformation so many times, but she actually doesn't want anything to change. Which I can identify with as well. I think that a lot of us talk like, oh, change and growth and moving forward, but change is really scary. And I think Jo's like our lens into seeing this sort of pain that change brings with it also. Because this is kind of around the time Jo, she goes to visit like Godzilla baby Hummel and gets sick, and this is devastating. You see her get so sick. Mr. Lawrence, who I love, comes and offers his physician, and they're just like fucking all waiting around for her to die. God knows how long this timeline was. And it made me think like how that would have looked at that time also. Like when people got sick, now you go to the hospital and hopefully people will get better, or you have a bit of more of an understanding of what's going on. Well, maybe in the time of COVID, it's not like that. But I can't even imagine just like sitting there waiting for someone to die this slow, painful death, like the person you love most in the world.
Yeah, the doctor shows up and he's got like a briefcase full of just assorted liquids. I saw that and I was like, oh God, like, yeah, she's in trouble. What is it? It's all just like...
They psyched us out. She's not dead.
Yeah, that was bullshit. Bullshit right there. Because I was like, oh no. And then there she is. Okay.
Yeah, because they have the housekeeper. She's crying in the hallway, so you assume she's dead, and Jo comes around the corner and the bed is empty. And then they're like, oh, psych, she's up drinking some broth. She drinks so much, slowly sips broth. That's mostly what Beth does in this movie is drinks broth.
She's a cloud of broth. Steamy broth.
And then it's Christmas again. This whole scene was way too much for me. I fucking lost it. I was like hysterical. Beth getting the piano from Mr. Lawrence, who like was revealed that he lost a daughter when his daughter was very young. Dad comes home. They're singing Christmas songs. This is really the last time they're all together in this scene. And I think having watched this movie so many times, it's extra tragic for me to watch. I'm like, oh no, enjoy it while it lasts, you guys. So I lost my mind. I always do at this scene.
Yeah. Like that really is like one of those things you look back in retrospect and you're like, that was the last time we were all together. And oh shit.
Yeah. And it's so it's so sweet. We didn't talk about, great Aunt March, who's Jo works as a companion for, who's such a bitch and has the best voice. And she sings in this scene and my sisters and I always lose it because it's such a great touch.
Because her timing is terrible. And everybody's like kind of singing along knowing that.
Yeah. And then, we fast forward 4 years later. So maybe they have been together for the past 4 years, but it's the last time we see them all together. Because boring Mr. Brooks and boring Meg get married. Amy's grown up at this point. So Amy starts sucking. And this is where Laurie sort of chases Jo into the woods and proposes. And actually, Joe seems as surprised as maybe you were.
Yeah, she definitely. Winona Ryder does a lot of face acting in this movie. Like, she is just like, her face is all over the place. Yeah. And this is definitely a moment where, like, her look of like revulsion and terror and fear is like, oh boy, she didn't see that coming. Yeah. And shoots him down.
It's I feel like very raw and real and sweet and heartbreaking. Poor Laurie. But I mean, Joe does the right thing. But I still feel so bad for him. But it's also kind of funny. Like, she's like, we'd kill each other. Like, we'd argue. And he's like, no, we wouldn't. And she's like, you can't even propose without us arguing. I think that's pretty real, too, because I think they probably could have got married and had a very comfortable life. But it just speaks to, like, what Joe wants in her life. And where she sees her life going, what she wants for herself, which is really, I think that happens a lot. I think that's even now that happens a lot of, well, this person might be okay for you and you may love them, but is it the best thing to do? So I think that shows sort of Joe's character and her sort of understanding of herself and wanting to be able to live as herself rather than live for somebody else, which fucking yeah, Joe.
Yeah, I think she correctly surmises that they are not a good fit for each other for, like, yeah, what she wants out of her life, what kind of, you know, if she's going to be someone's partner, like what kind of relationship that's going to be, versus, you know, she knows Laurie well and it's like, no, this is not gonna work. Sorry, bro. Yeah.
It is. I guess I'm never surprised, but I've seen this movie so many times. So I guess you're right. It's an interesting. I don't know. I wonder if. And again, I haven't read the book in years and years and years, but I wonder if Laurie it's one of those things where he's in love with the idea of Joe, not really who Joe actually is and what sort of life they would actually have. Mm-hmm. Again, classic. So Joe rejects the love of this man that she loves and her best friend. And then she finds out Amy's going to France with Aunt March.
Yeah, like 5 minutes later, she's just having the shittiest day here.
I feel bad. I almost feel bad for Amy. Amy almost looks afraid to let Joe know this because she knows Joe wants to go to Europe. She's like, Europe? Well, I have to deal with this bitch now, so I'm going to take advantage of this. So Joe's like, well, fuck you guys. I'm going to New York.
Life in the big city.
Life in the big city. And that's where she meets Friedrich.
So this definitely is the part of the movie where I was the most like, oh, I understand Yelena a lot more now.
What?
Oh, Friedrich? Tell me you're not in love with Friedrich.
I'm so in love with Friedrich.
Yeah.
Friedrich is my dream of dreams.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it's very sweet at first. She's working as, you know, a tutor or whatever to these kids, but she's really there to write. She wants to make it as a writer. But then this guy, this beautiful, dark-haired, handsome German man comes into the picture. Oh, they just bump into each other in the street and her manuscript goes everywhere. I love scenes like this. It's so stupid. And they have a connection and it's interesting. Like, he really is exposing her to new things. This is why I love Friedrich. He is exposing her to new things and allowing her growth, but on her terms, and allowing her to be who she is. And he also celebrates who she is while giving her room to grow and learn new things and expand her worldview. This is why I love Friedrich, and I love Joe and Friedrich. And then he takes her to the opera because he makes her feel bad because he's not sure about her work. And I get warm even thinking about it. It's great.
Yeah. Okay. So this is from Wikipedia. Friedrich Baer has all the qualities Bronson Alcott lacked. Is Bronson Alcott her husband? Warmth, intimacy, and a tender capacity for expressing his affection. The feminine attributes that Alcott admired and hoped men would acquire in a rational feminist world.
Yeah, Alcott.
Which is his character. Yeah, he's like he's just like pure. Like he's very kind.
Yeah.
They're both nerds, and they have, like a shared interest in the material that they work with, writing and literature and philosophy and
Right.
and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, he is like he's sort of walking this line between like mentoring her and like deliberately not mentoring her, like he knows that he's like older and sort of like, can guide her and sort of like shape her a little bit, but he also doesn't want to like do that too much, like he basically even says that. He's like, look, I can give you I'm not your teacher, I can give you my honest opinion of your work and stuff like that, but like you need to make your own decisions. You need to decide whether to throw that advice out or not, which is like, yeah, he's the perfect man.
He is. But he's poor, but Joe doesn't care about that. But they have a little, well, and then we kind of jump to Amy and Laurie in France, but we've already talked about that. Fuck those guys. We're not interested, right? So Joe leaves a manuscript for Friedrich that this is another point where Joe just can't catch a break, because she talks to Friedrich about what he thinks, and he's just really not into it. He's gentle with her, but he tells her honestly, like, is this what you want to write? Like, this isn't, I don't think this is you. I think you have so much more potential. You're limiting yourself almost. And so she's like, well, fuck me. And so she goes to her room and steps on a little telegram that's like, your sister's dying again. Come back home. Ugh. It's so sad. Joe just can't catch a break. I feel horrible for this woman.
Yeah. This is definitely another moment where like the book plot, I feel like this is all like spaced out a little bit more, whereas in the movie shit's just like fucking happening pretty fast. Yeah. So they kind of have like a bit of a leaving on bad terms then, but then they quickly reconcile. Wait, was this... Because there's like two moments where he sort of like gives her criticism and she takes it harshly. This is the first time. Later on, it's when she gives him...
No, this is the second time.
Oh, okay. Because there is the whole part before where like, she shows him, I think it's her book or something, and he gives her some like, that, not the Little Women book, but like the first one she had written. And he's like, it's good, but like I think it's not you. I think there's more to it. And then she's like, fuck, and she like storms off. And then like 2 seconds later in movie time, he's like, hey, sorry, and they're like, it's okay, so like the tension there is like tension gone immediately.
I think that he's quite gentle about it. I think when I was younger, I read that he was a little more of a dick about it, but really watching it as a grown woman, and as somebody who works in a field where I get feedback all the time, I was like, wow, this was very gentle of him. Why is she so upset? But I mean, she's also not used to that. She was a big fish in a little pond, and now she's in New York, baby. So she's got to pick it up. She's got to stand out. Yeah, but this was the second time, because then she goes home and fucking, oh my God, the Marmie's like, I think she's been waiting for you. And Beth gives her devastating final speech and dies for real. And Amy just was like, I'm too desolated. I'm not coming home from France.
I'm perfectly desolated here at the sanatorium, maybe.
Exactly. I love her vocabulary when she's younger. It's insane. I lost it in this scene as well. Like, we know Beth is going to die. Like, she's sick the whole fucking movie. But that speech is so heartbreaking. And then I wish I could remember the Evangeline or whatever, the housekeeper. She's like putting these little flower petals, and she holds this doll's hand and lets it go. I'm gonna like actually cry now. It's too much. It's so horrible. Which sort of like puts Joe into this tailspin of like memory lane, reminiscing, nostalgic kind of frenzy, where she kind of goes through her life and writes her book, Little Women.
Yeah, she immediately kind of like runs up to the attic and starts hammering away at it.
Yeah. She has a moment of inspiration. She must work with it.
Which is actually kind of an interesting thing. So like as I was watching the movie, I didn't really know any of the details of the plot. So as it was going on, I was like, oh shit, this is like adaptation. I'm watching the movie being written by the person writing it. So like, yeah, so she starts writing the story and I had read, like it was kind of based on the author's experiences. But in reality, when she wrote this, it was like she did it in 3 months. She was kind of like, her publisher was like, write this, do this, it'll work, trust me. And she's like, all right. And like she said, she like plodded through it. Like the actual process of writing this book for her doesn't sound like it was fun or inspirational or like she kind of just did it to crank it out there. And then it just happened to like be a fantastic piece of work that influenced literature forever. But that's kind of funny to contrast with the narrative in the story, which is like very touching and inspiring. And like this author's like, I am going to speak my truth and tell my story. When in reality, she was like, okay, it's a book about women.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Yeah. I actually should go back and reread it because, talking about all of this is really making me curious about what the book is, because I can't remember anything. So Jo goes on this frenzy. She's inspired. Meg and Mr. Brooks have twins, which is the cheesiest moment in the movie, I think, when she's like, you have a little baby girl and a boy.
Surprise.
The reveal. Yeah. It almost seems like, why did they even bother putting some of this in there? It could have left more room for other people, but I think maybe people who are diehards for the book would be like, where's Meg?
Yeah, like I get the impression that is a detail that happened in the book, and like their whole relationship, I imagine it might get fleshed out a bit more in the book. In the movie, like you just kind of just see it from a distance.
Totally. And I feel like that this last little bit is a bit rushed. I mean, I think it ties everything together nicely for all of these characters and for this family and the story, but it is rushed because it's like they have the twins and then Amy or Laurie shows up. He's like, I've been married. Surprise, it's your baby sister. Like, is this the best way to announce this type of situation right after your other sister has died? Like, it hasn't been that long.
Yeah, they are wrapping up a lot of plot points in a very short amount of time here. I am going to contest the cheesiest moment in the movie. I'm actually going to say it's slightly earlier. It's the scene where Jo starts writing down the stories and they take audio from earlier parts in the movie and like there was so many my limes and like oh, okay, I get it.
That's like a very 90s sort of thing, I think.
Yeah.
Lots of that montage type of stuff.
Yeah, so Meg has twins. Aunt March dies, and then I like the way Marmee very subtly is like, you should start a school here.
Yeah, Jo gets the house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting, like that. I was just thinking, like, that house is really big, and like that would be worth a lot of money. Like that is actually a pretty big boost in that family's fortunes right there. I guess it was already in the family, but like Aunt March was like, this is my house. You are allowed in the house if you are going to read me the Bible. Otherwise, fuck off.
Yeah. I think that this Little Men, is it called? I think is about Jo's school.
Oh, interesting.
I think. Anyway. Yeah, so Jo's going to start a school and then, oh man, she comes home one day, gets a book in the mail. Or I guess he drops it off for her. Right. He delivers the book, which is going to be published, Little Women. And she's fucking like, heck yes. And because also here she's kind of at home. She's helping her family. She's literally cooking in the kitchen or baking when this happens. So we're sort of seeing Jo. She looks like she seems fine. She seems like she's sort of like, okay, I'm home. This is my life right now, whatever. But then she gets this amazing news. And then the housekeeper tells her that she told the man at the door that Miss March and Laurie are living next door. They got married. Ugh. So Joe runs after her true love, Friedrich. That shot of Friedrich sort of like little Charlie Brown walking down the dirt road with all the green trees and it starts raining. I just love it. I can't handle this. It's a very cheesy kind of ending. But, you know, she explains, no, there's been a mistake. And he's sort of like passively like, well, I admit I wanted to see if maybe there was a reason for me to stay. And she's, but you are married. Congratulations. Anyway, bye-bye.
She sounds like
wait, no.
Werner Herzog there.
Yeah. I'd like to see a Werner Herzog version of Little Women, what that would look like. And just him narrating the whole thing as wow. Joe, maybe. Anyway. Yeah, it's kind of a cheesy ending, but I like it. I think it wraps things up. One thing I have to say, though, he says he's going west on a ship from Boston?
Okay, so I saw your note and I did some research. So the earlier scene, the woman who's the housekeeper, what's her name again?
I think it's Evangeline.
Yeah, her. She says, like, he said he had to catch a train. And then Joe goes out and runs after him. And then he also does say, I have to catch a train. But then in, like, the next sentence, he says, like, I think he says ship out. Like, we're shipping out.
Ship out.
Yeah. So, because I thought the same thing, though, when I was watching it. Because I remember he said Boston, West, and then I heard ship. And I was like, this doesn't make sense.
Okay. I rewound that. I was so confused. I was like, wait, have I thought Boston is in a different place than it actually is my whole life? I was like, where the fuck is this ship going? Is he going literally down the old South America way?
Yeah.
Up through? Anyway, okay, I'm glad that's cleared up. But anyway, the March girls all have their happy endings except for Beth, but I think Beth kind of is probably just like little cloud up in heaven smiling down on her sisters.
Yeah, so that last scene between Joe and Friedrich is like kind of over the top romantic, but I think it works. Like I have a huge crush on Winona Ryder just generally, and in this movie she is kind of adorable the whole time. Like she's just sort of like just always making like faces in anticipation of what other people are like going to say or think. And I wrote in my notes, like, she literally says, I'm not married, googly eyes, because like she's like when she's explaining, she's like, I'm not married, and like she could not be more like
Yeah, I think she's so great in this. I think like I wonder how much of that was like I think it was an intentional choice of like women were supposed to be a little daintier and not as expressive at that time, and she's just like you're right. When I read your note, I was like, oh, that's very accurate. She's full on with the face acting.
Go back and watch the scene where they're in the attic and they let Laurie in for the first time, and he's in the closet, and then she brings him out, and then like there's a shot of her standing next to him looking up, and he's like saying something, and she's just like her face is going nuts the whole time, just like, what is he gonna say?
I know the exact moment you were talking about, actually, because she's so great. She's so cute in that moment. I wanted to be her when I was younger. So like I also had like not a crush on her, but like I just loved her. And I think she just adds to my love of Joe also, who is likable anyway, I think.
Yeah, I was honestly starting to wonder, is Winona Ryder a bad actor? Like, is this just like really bad acting? Because she does also remind me like of Mina in Dracula here, you know, like I don't see them as maybe a totally different person, or, you know, it kind of helps that these are both like historical, you know, women.
Right.
Yeah. I think she's fine. I don't think she's a bad actor, but it kind of like almost was getting to that point where I'm like, this is really like, that is Winona Ryder.
Yeah. Yes. Well, she was like big time around this time.
Oh, yeah.
And a little bit earlier, I think, too. So I don't see this. I see it as very much a departure from Mina. Somebody actually messaged me last night and was like, yo, Winona Ryder's accent in Dracula is just as bad as Keanu's.
Disagree.
I said I don't think it's her accent's great, but I wouldn't go quite that far. But yeah, I'm fully on board with Winona Ryder. She's just so great. Now I want to go watch Heathers and Edward Scissorhands and just cheer on Winona Ryder.
I have been meaning to watch Heather, so we should get to that at some point.
Oh yeah, we should.
I've never seen it.
Oh, we got to do that one. Yeah, so that's Little Women. I mean, like I've said a million times, this is one of my all-time favorite movies, especially around the holidays. It's such a special movie. I love literally every single thing about it, except Amy 2's performance. But it's not even that bad. And I think this is one of those cases where even if someone doesn't objectively enjoy the story, I think that they can appreciate that it's good filmmaking, and great performances, and it's really well constructed, I think, in every way.
I agree. I enjoyed this movie quite a bit. After having watched it a second time, like, it really did grow on me, and I really like the vast majority of the performances and the characters, and I totally understand like why this is a movie you're fond of, and why it would be one that, you know, like a Christmas kind of thing. Like, it is the theme, you know, the theme is family. It's cozy, you know, especially in the early parts when things are going okay. Reminds me of the early parts of Legends of the Fall.
Right.
You know, similarities there, just like we're a happy family in our house singing around the piano.
Yeah.
And then before everything gets terrible. It did make me, like, I am genuinely interested in reading the book. I don't think that's actually going to happen, but I do kind of want to, just because seeing a movie version, I know I'm seeing something kind of being distilled into like some kind of essence, like these are the important plot beats, and these are the characters, and, you know, this is our version of them. So seeing this and this version of the characters and this version of the story kind of makes me like, that's why I was interested in checking out the newer version, to see like, so I could triangulate between them, I guess, and see like, all right, what are the commonalities, or like, what is their version of Joe or Amy like? I ended up not watching all of it just because I didn't want to like melt my brain too much and not be able to talk about this version. But yeah, so I'm interested in the source material. I doubt I'll ever read it.
There is a TV series, at least one. So I wonder if that a friend of mine said that they used to watch it over and over. So it might be worth checking out.
I could definitely,
if you find yourself wanting to learn more about the March Girls. Yeah,
or I could start reading all the sequels too, because there's like two additional books, I think, after this one.
Yeah, it's a whole world. All right, well, I'm glad you enjoyed it, because this one I was like, oh, I don't know if he's gonna like it. It's a lot maybe for some people, or just boring for some people. I thought you might just be really bored and have nothing to connect to.
That was the first half hour. Like that's why I was kind of like, when I first started watching it, I was like, this is going to be boring. But I think like, just as a general rule, I find watching a movie a second time, I always appreciate it a lot more, just because the first time I see a movie, I'm always kind of wondering like, where is the plot going? And that just kind of like, my brain is just kind of always thinking about that kind of stuff. But also, by the end of a movie, the first time I've seen it, that's maybe how long it takes me to really kind of grasp the character sometimes. So then when I watch it a second time, I sort of like, I know the character's journey and what they're about, and I can appreciate like the little details more. And it makes the story, when you know, it's kind of like meeting someone new. And you're not sold on them, you know, you're like, all right, there's this new person. Like, I don't know how I feel about them yet. So like, whatever. But after you've known them for a while, you're like, oh, it's that person. So then if I know who that person is, even if it's kind of the boring early part of the movie, I'm like, I know who these characters are. I like them. So now I'm kind of like, I'm happy to see the story and how it plays out.
So this is sort of like your Blade, or what Blade Runner was to me, Little Women has been to you.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm glad. And I love this movie. I give it 9.75. I'm docking 0.25 for Amy 2, but I give it 9.75 Friedrich soft words of affirmation out of 10.
I'm going to give this 8 dozen limes.
Perfect. Okay, well, yeah, go watch Little Women if you haven't, people, especially around Christmas. And let us know what you think.
You know what?
You can email. Oh,
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just want to say this is a kind of a tough movie to watch in COVID times because it is sort of the opposite of like the reality we're all living in right now. Is like, you know, you're in your pod on the Zoom call alone versus like everybody is in big houses together and we're around the fire playing piano.
You know what? It is a little hard. I think part of the reason I cried through most of this year, because I always do cry, it was because it was thinking about, oh shit, things change so much and things are definitely looking different this year. So maybe put it on your list for next year in the hopes that we can gather next year, or just get someone cranking on that piano over Zoom, I guess.
Get one of those
stay safe.
Player pianos and set up some mannequins and reenact your own version of Little Women.
And email it to us at xpostwatcho@gmail.com. Or find us on Facebook and Instagram at xpostwatcho. We're also on YouTube. If you want to listen to us on YouTube, we would appreciate if you're enjoying this, a rating wherever you're listening. And am I missing anything?
Nope.
So next week we are going to watch Goodfellas. So a little bit of a departure.
Little Women, Goodfellas. Hey. Like I planned it.
Perfect. Well, we will we'll bring our voices to you next week then when we talk about Goodfellas. Ta-ta.